I wanted to talk about the role of power in Woman at Point Zero instead of doing the sentence for this week's vlog. So during my free write, I wrote that the role of power in the book sets up one to me that stuck out to me. I know not a lot of people did the role of power, but I thought that it was very essential to the book, and because Firdaus is very powerless in the beginning of the book. Like, when she's a child, she is extremely powerless. Her mother tells her what to do. Her father controls the whole household, and what they eat, whatever. So she's very, very powerless in the beginning, but she uses, as she grows up, as she learns from her experiences with men, she uses her prostitution to gain power over men, which is something that we don't normally think of when we think of or talk about prostitution. We don't think of it as women having a certain power over men. It's more like we think of prostitution as something that is forced upon women, and that women are powerless to change it. So the quote that I wanted to talk about first is on page 54, and it reads, so this is when Firdaus comes back to her uncle's house from her husband's house after he beats her. And it reads, "But my uncle told me that all husbands beat their wives, and my uncle's wife added that her husband often beat her." I'm going to skip down to the end of that paragraph, and it says, "She replied that it was precisely men well versed in their religion who beat their wives. The precepts of religion permitted such punishment. A virtuous woman was not supposed to complain about her husband. Her duty was perfect obedience." And I wanted to talk about this because while reading that really hit me, because the role of power in that quote is the men. Throughout this whole book, men are the ones who have power over women, or over everything, really. And so the role of power in that is submission by beating, and forced submission by beating. But Firdaus says that she's not going to put up with that anymore and leaves. That role of power was something that I thought needed to be addressed, especially with the whole good husbands beat their wives, because I think that's at the moment where Firdaus is deciding to make her own plans and deciding that she would rather be a prostitute, a successful prostitute, than be a slaved wife, because wives in this context are women who are pretty much enslaved to their husbands, which are men, to the power of role that she has over herself and over her own body, because she decides that she does not want to be a part of that marriage life, so she leaves it and decides to become a prostitute. And then the second quote I wanted to talk about was on page 100, which we did talk about in the discussion, but I wanted to bring it up because it plays into what else I'm going to say. She gets arrested by the policeman, and "I am saying that you are all criminals, all of you. The fathers, the uncles, the husbands, the pimps, the lawyers, the doctors, the journalists, and all men of all professions." And I'm going to skip past what they say, and she continues, "I am speaking the truth, and truth is savage and dangerous." I wanted to talk about that because while she's in jail, she's still clinging to power. Not necessarily clinging to power, but she still has power. She still has power. Doesn't necessarily mean control, but she still does have control over her own life, and which gives herself her own power. And So she threatens them with the truth, which is that the patriarchy here is something that should be demolished, something that is led by men and is absolutely awful, and that she knows that it's being led by men and that it's awful. And that she's such an empowering figure that she could probably make a difference in the patriarchy. I mean, she does say later that she doesn't want to get out because then she'd just start killing a bunch of men, but Ferdows is a defiant and powerful woman, and she won't stop what she's doing, and she could make a dent in the patriarchy, which is why the guards and everybody else who was in the jail was so frightened of her. She knows that she has power, and so she knows how to utilize her power. However, in order to utilize her power, she would have to give in to the patriarchy. So she decides to end her life and take control of her own life once and for all, really. It's part of the role of power in this book. There's many more examples and whatnot, but that for right now. But that is something to think about when thinking about the role of power in the book.